Welcome to the Leader Mentality Show with Rob Clemens. We have a special show today, as always. There are always special shows. I don't want to tell people there's not a special show today.
They're all special.
They
like
are
your children, they're all special.
Absolutely. But I have a great guest, and he's going to be talking about something we've never talked about before. He's got a company that is doing something that we've never had anybody on the show talking about before, but it's extremely important. We're talking about mental health. We're talking mental wellness, and this is something that is hugely important to everybody who's listening. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the difference between allowing yourself to be vulnerable for growth versus being a victim, which can have the opposite of growth. And so I'm pleased to introduce to the show the founder and executive director of Living Water. His name is Ben Greenzweig. I almost said Weig.
That would have been acceptable too.
Well, you know, I took German years ago.
Oh, well,
Ben,
that's the name.
And when you have a W, it's always a V.
Correct.
And so I was actually I went back to my German days from college.
All right, well, that's pretty impressive. A lot better than some others do. So I give you extra gold star for that.
I could have done the whole thing. Ich heiße Rob.
Guten Tag.
Guten Tag.
And that is 100% of my German.
Me too. I've got like 3 sentences from every language, and we can do them all. But then after that, I'm done for. Well, hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
And it's important stuff we're going to be talking about today. And I believe that this is a message that needs to get out. The leader mentality always want to bring something to the viewer that they might not have heard before, or that they've heard but they haven't heard in depth. So excited to have you on.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for giving mental health an opportunity to talk on your podcast.
100%. Well, let's get started with a little bit about Living Water. Tell me about what you guys do.
So, Living Water Mental Health Brain Treatment Center is a 501c3 nonprofit. Story behind why I chose to go nonprofit, but it's important to me that we are investing in our community and can leave a legacy long after me and others are gone to help people who are struggling with their mental health. And what we do is that we provide breakthrough, rapid-acting mental health treatments. And that is primarily in the form of a really long word that most people have never heard of before called Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation, or TMS.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. How did you initially hear about this treatment?
Well, interestingly enough, TMS was first researched at MUSC in the 1980s. So our state has done a terrible job of getting a lot of pride for something that is changing a lot of people's lives. But the real short version is a good friend of mine who is a dual board certified child and adolescent psychiatrist up in New York City, a friend named Dr. Owen Weir. He and I have known each other for years, and he has been a pioneer in this field, which is broadly called neuromodulation, which are drug-free, non-invasive, highly successful alternative treatments for behavioral health conditions like depression, anxiety, OCD, and bipolar. And I've been following him, and I've been following his research, and I could not believe what I had read. Because like most things with technology, over the past few years, they've just gotten better and faster. And I was just shocked that this existed, that most people hadn't heard of it. And this could be a real game changer for a lot of people.
No question about it. Yeah, one of the things, and we're going to talk a lot about, how you got here, why you started this over time, but I find it interesting that you mentioned this is drug-free.
Completely.
And I feel like so often in modern society, we're told, take this for this, take that for that. We're conditioned to do that, and you have gone the opposite route of that.
Well, I've gone the opposite way in my thinking. There are great pioneers before me that felt that, but here's really where the difference comes in. If you go to the doctor and you have a broken leg, what's the goal? What's the treatment goal of your orthopedist? Put you on the spot, Rob. What's the goal?
Well, I'd like to get my leg mended and fixed so that I can use it again as it was before.
So you could maybe make the broad statement that the goal would be remission of your broken leg symptoms. You don't want it to be broken. You want to run on it. You want to jump on it. With mental health, when you're battling, say, depression, how often is the goal of your treatment plan remission?
I mean, that's a great question. That's a great question.
And the answer is not that much.
Yeah.
And part of that is because everyone is different, and everyone has a different treatment plan and different traumas and different influences. But most people who are on medication, who certainly don't have success with the first pill, you're no longer focused on remission. You get into that world of maintaining your mental health. How many times have you heard that? We're looking to maintain. We're looking to stabilize. We don't talk about remission with mental health nearly as much as we should.
Interesting. Do you find that with depression, is this something that ever gets cured, or is it something that you do have to just constantly work with throughout a life?
Well, I don't know if I'm expert enough to directly answer that question, but what I'll say is there's lots of different kinds of depression, right? There is situational depression. You lose a parent, you lose a loved one. It's understandable that you are depressed. I'm a faithful man, and Scripture is littered with so many references to depression, to anxiety, to worry, to fear. Depression is a natural human emotion, but for some people, they can work through their depression, they can listen to their pain, they can get over their pain, and that pain doesn't need to define them. But for a certain portion of the population, there is something that's not firing correctly in the brain. There's something that's just not working the way it should, and it makes it very hard to break free of your depression, and then the waterfall of what that impacts with your life, from your professional to your personal. That's where things get pretty messy pretty fast.
You know, one of the things that I think is troubling about healing, or it's a trouble towards healing, is that people's misperception of what it means to be something. And let me tell you where I'm going with that. So a lot of us, to your point, have been depressed at some point, and maybe it is situational, as you mentioned, the loss of a loved one. It could be a breakup that was very traumatic, and now you're depressed, right? You may be a level 3 on a depression in general. Maybe something within you leads you down some dark alleys that you don't understand. But then there's the people on the far end of the spectrum. We're talking 8s and 9s. And the problem sometimes comes down to that those people who have experienced a little bit of situational depression or low-level depression are like, hey, just shake it off. Shake it off. You're going to be okay. And they're not catching the big detail.
Those cliches are so frustrating. You know, I know we'll get into this, but I battled depression, anxiety, and PTSD for decades of my life. And listen, people who want to say, shake it off, it's always darkest before dawn, this too shall pass, they're not wrong. They're coming from a good place, but it just doesn't help. And for some people, they don't need any kind of treatment. For others, they need a little bit of treatment. And for a good amount of people, they need a lot of treatment. And it's very hard to determine going into it who, you know, what they are and what they need. You know, the other part that you said as well is, you know, what does depression look like? You know, what does anxiety look like? You know, something I found as frustrating as it's always darkest before dawn. You'd always look up stock imagery of someone who's depressed or suicidal, and you'd always get the same picture, right? I'm going to let your audience know. You get the same picture, right? It's a man or woman like this.
Oh, yeah.
Or sitting in the corner like this. That's not what it looks like for most people. What it looks like for most people is this. Because the number one goal when you are massively depressed, when you are thinking about self-harm, when you're in a world of hurt, the number one goal is to mask it and not show. And there's a lot of reasons for it, which makes it harder to address and even harder to treat.
Man, it's like you always hear those things. Oh, he seems so happy. She seems so happy. And then something happens and you don't understand it. And maybe the people closest to them did see it. But you think about Robin Williams. I've spoken a lot about Robin Williams over the years as I'm doing my DISC assessments with people. And I always use him as the I-type personality. He's the influencer of all influencers. And yet he inside, he was crushed enough to do something that most of us would never do. And I think there's something very real about that. Wow.
Well, and part of why Living Water was formed as a nonprofit, yes, we want to deliver these treatments to our community here in Horry County and surrounding areas, but the second part of it is to work on destigmatizing the conversation on mental health, which you are doing a phenomenal job by inviting me on to talk about. But we need to be able to talk about our mental health struggles, because until we talk about them, chances are you're not going to want to seek treatment for them.
Well, absolutely. The first step is to actually want to try to improve. It's funny. I was reading a good book over the weekend, which I'm going to talk about on another show, so I'm going to leave that off for now, but hit a couple of topics that you said just a minute ago. One of them is sometimes these little euphemisms we use, they become so overused that they lose the power that they should have. You know, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. It's like you start saying this, it loses all the meaning, right? And so I think that happens when they say there's a brighter day ahead, and you know, it's like, hey, let's really get to the gravity of what's going on. And the second thing they talked about is that you actually have to accept that something does need to be changed, and that can be scary. Right?
It can be scary, and again, I'm a faithful man, and Scripture is littered with promises that's going to be a challenging life. Scripture says when storms come, not if storms come. Storms are going to come. life is hard. There's a lot of infrastructure that was put in Scripture to help us navigate and work through a lot of these struggles, but it never says, keep them quiet. Keep them bottled inside. Don't talk about them. Don't find people you can confide with. Don't seek help. Now, there are different ways that can obviously unfold itself, but to your point, mental health is health. And the more we can start equating these two together, yeah, that guy is depressed. Oh, he must be weak. No, he's not weak. You know, it takes a lot of effort to go about your daily life as a mom, as a dad, as a grandma, as a grandpa, brother, sister, to go to work, to drop your kids off in the morning, to be present while you are completely extinguishing what is a burning fire of depression or anxiety in your life. That is not weakness, that is strength.
Man, one thing I will say, and anybody who listens to the show knows that my wife has had me watch a good bit of Dr. Phil over the years. And I heard a great Dr. Phil one time. I might have even said it on the show before, but he's talking to one of the guests. And by the way, you know, no matter what you want to say about the man, he has had an amazingly popular show over the years. So, I mean, he has some tips in there. And this lady's talking about this, her son, like, hey, this, and if he would just do this. And Dr. Phil at some point goes, you might as well be telling him to be 7 feet tall right now. And, you know, and I took away from that, I'm like, we will look at a person's physical limitations and understand that. Hey, he's only 5'10", so he can't dunk a basketball. This person is, you know, whatever. They've only got 1 foot, so they can't, you know, walk a marathon. But when it comes to the mental side, which is more powerful than the physical, we just kind of sweep that under the rug.
Well, listen, look at the name of your podcast. Leader mentality. There's a reason why you focus on the mental aspect of leadership. It is the hardest part. You know, the Navy SEALs, one of the great, sort of mottos of the Navy SEAls is that the body can take a lot. It's the mind we work on.
I love that.
And I am nowhere near as strong to have ever been in Special Forces in my life.
I was about to ask you if you're a former Navy SEAL.
I am 100% not. A lot of respect for him, but no.
Absolutely.
But that just shows you the powerful of the mind right there.
Very, very, very true. Well, let's go back to that in a minute. Before we dive too deep, what kind of things you've been working on lately with Living Water?
So it has been a relentless pursuit to get open, to get our machinery, to start screening and treating patients. So October 1, we took occupancy of our office. So we are in Myrtle Beach, which we're very excited about.
Nice.
So we've been spending a lot of our days not only in the community, we joined the Chamber of Commerce recently. We're part of HC3, Horry County Community Collaborative.
Nice.
So we are really in as many events as we can be in. I've done farmers markets and Market Common and Surfside. But when I'm not doing that, me and my colleague, we're building furniture. We're decorating. We're buying dustpans and brooms and trying to get our office up and going. We should be getting delivery of our machinery hopefully within the next week or so, and then we can start screening and then treating patients, which is the ultimate goal right now.
So we're getting near the end of October, so you're thinking of November, you could be up and actually doing it.
I was hoping to be treating patient 1 by Halloween.
Oh, of course you are.
But it's humility and understanding there's God's timing and my timing, so I'm just letting him take the wheel obviously at this point, but we hope to be treating patients certainly by early November.
One thing I do like to talk about on the show is everybody wants to be a business owner. I was talking to some Coastal Carolina students at Coastal Carolina last week. Sean Supp, everybody knows I'm a Coastal grad. And but I was talking to them and I said to the kids, I said, raise your hand if you want to be a business owner one day. And I spoke to 3 different groups of kids. And in each group, I'm going to say maybe 25% of the hands raised. So it goes to show you where, you know, people's aspirations are, their dreams are. And I'd say chase those dreams. But as a business owner, there's a little fear.
A lot of fear.
It's healthy, right? You know, hey, look, no consistent paycheck coming in, so this better work. There's a lot of heart and excitement in it, passion. And I find it's just such a cool thing. So to hear you talk about building furniture, I almost picture you in there. And with each piece of furniture you're building, you're a little closer to the dream.
That's right.
It's got to be the best furniture you ever put together.
I'm really good at the Allen key. You did mention something I want to grab. They mentioned heart. So I'm a second-time founder. I've been, prior to this, I was in the trade show, conference, and media business for 25 years.
Nice.
I launched my own events company in 2012. And if you want to have someone on your show where they had luck and things worked out and they were successful and they can tell the story, It's not me. I'll walk out there. I am not that guy to tell that story.
Right.
I got stories. We got heartache. We got setback. But we just found a way. We grind. And probably the biggest endearing comment I could say about that part of my career is I'm a survivor. I'm not a thriver necessarily in that example, but I'm a survivor. But I share that because I was very good at that, and despite all the challenges, we maintained our business. And we're talking about a live event business that survived recessions and COVID and a whole bunch of other stuff. I had a partner who passed away, and a lot of story there for probably part 2. But the difference in launching this nonprofit where, again, maybe your audience didn't hear me. I was a trade show and event media guy. I was not a healthcare guy. I was not a behavioral health guy. So going into something so far outside my comfort zone, but having that burning heart to want to know that every piece of furniture is one step closer to possibly helping someone get their depression into remission, overcome their PTSD, manage their OCD or their bipolar. There is no paycheck, there's no trophy, there is no award that I've ever seen, heard, or experienced that comes anywhere close to the fire and the passion of trying to help people and follow what your purpose is. And I'm 46. It took me 45 years to find that passion in my life. So,
man, well, if you're out there and you're listening, you're trying to find your passion, no, it's not odd to be in your 40s still trying to find your passion, but when you do, you got to go for it.
That's right.
The other thing is on the leader mentality, that is the leader mentality. It very rarely are any of the successes you've seen out there just over, they just picked up the basketball and started hitting shots. They started the company and the customers started lining up at the doors. It's ups and downs, more downs than ups sometimes, especially in the beginning, but you keep thriving and persevering, and that to me is greatness. So, man, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a few moments. Before we get into part 2 of the show, I do want to thank our sponsors, Carolina Bays Real Estate and Construction. Absolutely. Check them out for all real estate and construction needs, and we will be right back in a sec. So, Ben, the amazing stuff. I've really enjoyed getting to hear all about what you're doing, what Living Water does. Tell us a little bit about how you got here and this role.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So it was about a year ago, December, January of last year, early this year. We were coming off of just a crazy year in the events world, obviously, with what's going on in the economy and the world in the past 4 years, very up and down in the world of gatherings here. And I had a calling. I had a burden on my heart. There was something the Lord was saying to me about helping your community here. And I love our community here. We've been here under 5 years, and I love everything about our community. And my wife and I try to find every way we can to be engaged, whether it's our church, school, sports, etc. And mental health is my passion purpose. It's often said your past misery becomes your future ministry. And so helping people has always been something I wanted to do, but I never understood how to do it. And so I kept on getting this kind of nagging tapping. Hey, I want you to do something. I want you to do something. I'm like, okay. So I went to the Lord in prayer. I sequestered a closet of mine, which my younger daughter had all American Girl doll stuff in, and moved it to the side and sat there with the lights off and quiet, and just sat there quietly waiting to hear and to hear what he had to say to me. And came to me and said, you're going to build a mental health clinic and help your brothers and sisters who are suffering right here in Ori. And, I was like, okay. What? Went back again. I said, how am I going to do that? More days in prayer, and came back and said, you're going to focus on delivering, treatments to people. I said, okay. Now, I used to say as luck would have it, Rob. I now do say as God would have it. He had been laying these steps long before he came to this realization. My good friend, Dr. Muir, who I mentioned earlier in the show, he's involved in a number of businesses. He has his own clinic in New York City. He's the medical advisor of a great clinic out in Silicon Valley and a few other ventures. I called him up and I said, Dr. Muir, Owen, you're doing this amazing stuff here using this stuff called TMS, and it's unbelievable. Is there any reason why that doesn't exist here in Myrtle Beach? Like, why is it not here? And he goes, well, there's no reason why it can't be there. And that's where the idea came to launch Living Water, which is how do we bring these treatments here? And as God would have it, one of Owen's newest businesses, now a year old, is he's building a company that will help plant these kinds of mental health treatment centers throughout the country in a quasi-franchise mode. And they agreed to work with me as one of the first 3 pilot locations. So I had no idea how to build clinical operations for a mental health treatment facility. And here the Lord provides a friend of mine who's building a business that delivers clinical operations to mental health treatment facilities.
Wow, that's pretty cool stuff. I find something you said to be very powerful part of leadership. And again, to recap with people, leadership isn't a rank, okay? It is a recognition of things that can be made better. It's making your immediate environment better by your very presence. And that doesn't usually mean that you've stepped up and stepped on everybody's shoulders. It means you lift everybody up. And you said, why is there not this? And the answer was, there's no reason that there should not be. And if you think back to John F. Kennedy, just the way he spoke. He said, I don't see things, and I'm not going to exactly phrase them, but he says, I don't see things and say, why not? He's basically saying, or I actually did it in reverse, but he's saying, why shouldn't there be things that there need to be here? And so often we get stuck in these ruts of just going through and, oh man, this stinks, this is hard. You found the answer.
Well, and I'll bring it back to how you opened the show. How many times are we given a health diagnosis and we accept it? Mm-hmm. How many times have you sought second opinions, third opinions, alternative opinions? And I'm not saying you have a broken leg, you want to get 5 opinions. You have an x-ray, you got to get a cast.
Right.
Pretty clear. But when you're talking about something more complicated, how many people do we know who've had cancer, who have had, mental health issues, stomach issues, skin issues, that they're relentless in trying to understand and make sense of what's going on and not just accepting a first diagnosis or a primary because they just know something doesn't sit right. To me, it was the same thing. These things exist. They're safe. They're highly effective. Why can't they come here? And that's what drove me to have that conversation, and that's where the idea for Living Water was born.
Awesome. So talk about the TMS. Yeah. I'd like to understand it a little bit better because obviously in the hierarchy of things, when people are talking about mental health, there's some things naturally that you could do. You should get more sunlight, I've heard.
Yep.
You should try to eat as healthy as you can, I've heard. Go work out some. It releases some positive things within your body and releases natural chemicals that can be very good for you. Some dopamine, for example, can come naturally through certain things. But in the hierarchy of things, tell me a little bit about TMS and why it works and what it is.
I'll try to do my best to do a short version of it. So in brief, the way TMS, Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation, works is that it delivers a series of theta bursts of electromagnetic stimulation to the area of your brain that is highly targeted where things like depression live. So what do I mean by that? If you're depressed, there is an area in your brain, usually in the frontal cortex, that is not firing correctly. Think of an orchestra. If the strings are out of tune, the orchestra is not going to sound great. Now, it's not the music's fault, it's not the conductor's fault, it's not the drum's fault. It's this one section of the orchestra that's not working properly. What are you going to do? You're going to get those strings in tune. So what TMS does is it works to get that section of your brain in tune. Now, the way medicine works is using chemicals. It tries to create a reaction, a chemical reaction, to help those neurons fire. That's the basis for a lot of these medicines. The problem with that is you can't tell a pill to just go here or just go there. It goes here. So with that, you have a lot of efficacy challenges. You have a lot of side effects. Some are pretty gnarly if you've ever been on that stuff before, which I have. So what we do is we remove the sort of scattergun approach towards getting that part of your brain to fire correctly by highly concentrating this electromagnetic stimulation into your brain. To be clear, this is FDA cleared. This is 40-plus-year-old technology. It's been approved since 2008. So this isn't just, hey, some guy in the backyard tinkering with some magnets here. It's a very targeted MRI. They know where they're going, and the targeting is key. And the outcome data and the results are unbelievable. And I can get into that if you want to.
Oh, absolutely. No, I do want to get into that. Before we get into that, I want to ask, when it comes to this treatment, is it an ongoing thing that somebody will get regularly for the rest of their lives? Is there an end game to it?
It's a great question. So as we said earlier, you go to the doctor, the goal of your doctor if you have a broken leg is let's heal the leg. Our goal at Living Water and working with Dr. Muir, our goal is remission. We're starting from how do we get you into remission of your symptoms. And so our goal in a dream scenario is to see someone for a course of treatment, and we'd like to never see them again.
Wow.
And there are two kinds of treatments. And this is still breakthrough technology, so the treatment protocols are still being tweaked to this day, to this month, and will keep on going. But the first course of treatment is called accelerated TMS. It's 10 treatments a day for 5 days. Now, before you think 10 treatments is a lot, Each treatment's about 9 minutes.
Okay.
Then there's something called traditional TMS, which is 36 treatments, which is about 2 a day for 18 days. And there are new treatment protocols being researched as well. And just to let you know how effective this can be, for people who have not had success with medicine or they don't like the side effects of medicine, up to 80%, 79% clinically published data, up to 80% of people leave accelerated TMS in remission of their depression.
80%.
Not a little better.
My gosh.
Not a lot better. 80% remission.
Wow. And man, that's amazing. I mean, everybody should be using this. I mean, honestly, well, okay, the system works, and from what the studies show, let me get back to a step before that system. How should somebody know if they need this? How does somebody know if they're depressed to a level that is something they should be considering?
Well, I would say the very first step is if you've been on medicine and it hasn't worked. That is absolutely, the FDA clearances for TMS are around treatment resistant, which means either you don't like the pills or the pills aren't working. And by the way, TMS is cleared for not only depression, anxious depression, OCD, bipolar. There's a list of stuff that goes on. So if you've been on medicine and you don't like the side effects, or the medicine's not working, or you've changed up your medicine to try to get a better result, you are a phenomenal candidate to look into this.
Okay.
We are not at the level where someone should recreationally want to come in and just go through this. We don't advocate for that. But these are for people who are struggling where medicine just has not worked.
Okay. Does somebody need to get a doctor to recommend them to you guys, or how does that work?
So we don't need a referral. We are starting as self-pay. We will eventually get into the world of insurance. It is a very complicated arena to take insurance. We want to. It's part of our mission. We just need a little bit of time to get there. But the way it works is someone goes online, fills out a form. We do a pre-screen, and then Dr. Muir, who's our medical advisor, does a virtual visit with a diagnosis and a prescription. That prescription comes to our team right here in Myrtle Beach, and we as technicians actually administer the treatment with the TMS machine. So the consult is done virtually, and the treatment is done in the office.
Man, very cool. How big is this machine? I'm just curious.
You know what? It's remarkably portable.
It
can fit in the back of a Sprinter van. If one day we pray we can take this mobile and go to places where they can't get to it. But let me just give you one example on who should be a candidate for it. In a recently published study, about 1,300 patients enrolled in this study to undergo TMS where medicine didn't work. Something like 80-something% of them, 79-80%, went into remission. Something like 82% to 84% had a significant reduction in symptoms. And those numbers are great, but here's the real number to take away. The average patient in that study, over 930 of them, so we're talking close to 75%, had already gone through an average of 7.4 medications with no success.
Well, and look, as we're talking about this, Ben, part of my thing is, if you ever watch the show, we never want this to feel like a infomercial.
Correct.
But the point of what you're doing is exactly that. It's if you're out there, you've been struggling, you're trying to find something better for yourself, your best self could be right around the corner by just finding something different. If something you're doing isn't working, part of the point of life is to find out what does work. I'm very pumped about what you're doing there. Let me ask you a couple of questions, because we're getting towards the back half of the show, and I do want to just kind of see for some of the things that came to my mind while you're talking. There's a lot of natural remedies, and if you go back through the history of time, I'm sure probably back when the pyramids were being built, people were depressed, right? This is not a recent phenomenon, but there's things like natural remedies such as tyrosine, which is a amino acid that some people take, and they say it helps with proper neurotransmitter firing. St. John's wort, kava, those kinds of products. Where do you think that some of the natural remedies might play a role along with your TMS?
So I will definitely declare I'm no expert. I think there's a time and a place for natural remedies. I really do, especially when it comes to mental health. It goes back to our prior conversation. For some people, they can get over their depression on their own. For others, these natural remedies might work wonderfully for them. For another portion, it's not going to work, and they need something that's a little bit more consistent or stronger or more focused, like a TMS, for example. To me, natural remedies, here's the problem with natural remedies. It is a wild, wild west in terms of regulation.
For sure.
You go on Amazon, you go to Walmart.com, you have no idea what you're going to get. So I think the theory of natural remedies can work, they can help for all things. I mean, I have a good friend of mine who lives down in Florida. This guy's got about 47 bottles on his desk. They're all natural, doesn't take a single prescription. He's 76 years old. His blood work is like 51 years old.
Right.
Bless his heart,
Yeah.
right? But he's been studying this field for 40 years.
Sure.
So I think like all things, if you trust your source, if you trust someone to guide you, I have no visceral response to natural remedies being something that you should explore. Just know your source.
I think that's a very, very good point, actually. I think that sometimes the Wild Wild West is exactly how I describe it. You know, hey, I read an article, it says I should take some St. John's wort. You go to the store, you get the stuff. It's not even been FDA tested to make sure there's the right amount of that product in the capsule.
Correct.
And now you're just trying things. You're just indiscriminately trying. You need an expert sometimes to guide you. So, well said. Let's take a quick break.
Sure.
Powerful stuff, Ben. This is very, very informative, and I've appreciated you coming on and talking what you talked about. Before we get to the end of the show, we started off talking about being vulnerable versus being a victim, and the power within understanding that you're vulnerable, which sometimes leads you to finding a solution, versus being a victim, which is looking for somebody to fix you. Tell me a little bit about that, and how does that play a role?
So this is important to me as someone, again, who's battled a lot of mental health issues for a long time. I was a victim for a long time. Poor me, it's not my fault. All these bad things happen to me. I mean, listen, you can throw a quarter in a Walmart and hit someone who's had terrible things that have happened to them. We've all had bad stuff that happened to us. But to me, what's important as a culture, as a society, as a community, is how do we separate the difference between becoming vulnerable and becoming a victim or having victimhood mentality. So for me, vulnerability is being able to talk with a spouse, a friend, a small group, a coworker, someone you can trust and say, hey, I'm not doing well. I don't need to bottle this all inside. I don't need to push it down and suppress it. I want to have a conversation. Rob, it's been rough, man. I got a new kid, or I lost my job, or I got this debt, or I got this health problem, or my dad, or my... Talk about it. Be vulnerable. It's okay to admit. If you broke your leg, you wouldn't be hiding that you'd be walking in a cast with a cane, to keep that analogy throughout the show.
Yeah.
However, watch that transition into victimhood, where you start blaming your life circumstances and start blaming your traumas and start blaming your problems as a reason why you don't want to get better. So being vulnerable can be a pathway towards healing. Being victim and displaying victimhood behavior, that's a downward spiral, and I'm telling you, it is not going to lead to growth and to healing for yourself.
Man, I like the way, and just to firmly put a bow on the whole analogy of breaking your leg. It's sort of like this. If you had broken your leg and you were too ashamed to go get it fixed for some reason, we don't feel like that, but let's say that were something that would happen, what would you do? Would you sit around and try to pretend you didn't break your leg and try to get treated because you don't want anybody to know that you broke your leg? And certainly what would happen with your leg at that point? It might eventually mend, but in some mangled way, and it would never be the same as it should have been from the first place. So well done with that. My final question for you, are you a person that has tried TMS, and did it work for you?
So I personally have not. I wish it existed when I was in the absolute worst of my life, and that is why I'm so passionate about it. However, Dr. Muir, my medical advisor and psychiatrist, who is very open, and it's rare for people in the mental health space to be so open about their struggles, he suffered from bipolar depression. And he was almost at complete risk of flunking out of med school. His scores were great. He was academically proficient. His bipolar was just too much for him. And after trying so many medicines that had horrific side effects for him, he found a psychiatrist who said, listen, I can get you on this machine. It's worth the shot. I don't know. He did it, and it saved his life. And so for my medical advisor, for our psychiatrist, for our prescriber to have gone under it himself and to have been transformed by it, that was good enough to me. And listen, I don't deny the fact that there might be a day I'm going to need it. And I want to have it here for me, my friends, and my family to use if that day comes.
That makes good sense. Well, Ben, great stuff today. I appreciate it. And we didn't get to talk about this earlier, but the first time I met you, I felt a spirit within you. And when I talk about spirit, I don't accept that everybody necessarily subscribes to Christianity, to being Hindu, to being whatever you are, but the spirit within can just be something that you're a guiding light for others. And I sense the spirit in you that you are passionate about what you're doing, that you had something you felt like would help people, and just the way you present yourself, you're a guy who wants to do better for others. So, man, I appreciate that about you. I hope this goes crazy, and I hope sincerely, if you're listening to this show today and you've struggled with this, just know that you're not by yourself. That there's a lot of people out there that have this, that, by the way, a lot of the people aren't talking about it, so you're not seeing them doing it, but it's because they're not talking about it, and that there's nothing wrong with fixing yourself and making yourself better.
That's right.
All right. Well, hey, listen, it's the Living Water. Living Water. Ben, how do they find you?
Thank you again, Robin. Before I do that, I just want to thank you so much for this platform, for the opportunity. It's been an absolute pleasure. Online, livingwaterclinics.com, Instagram and Facebook at Living Water Clinics, pretty consistent. Look us up, plenty of information and resources on our website. And I think if I could just say to your point, if you think treatment with us is great, phenomenal. If you just think that from this show, you'll just talk about it and find some help, some treatment anywhere, that's great too.
Man, that's awesome. Hey, his name is Ben Greenzweig. He is with Living Water. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Rob. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. And for you out there listening, we appreciate our viewers, appreciate our sponsors, Carolina-based Real Estate and Construction. And go out and do something good in the world. There are always bad things happening to people. It is the challenge of the world. But as Ray Dalio said, you can learn and expect those downsides to happen and be a hand that can pull somebody up when they're in one of those down phases, and also know you might have one that's coming in the future, and it's okay to take somebody else's hand while they pull you up. So this is the Leader Mentality Show with Rob Clemens. We'll see you all next time.